I have a simple subject this morning. It's how people die in the workplace and how they get injured and what we need to do about it, both union and management. When you make a speech, you're supposed to use some visual aids, and I brought some. They're just three little ordinary items, and I want to pass them around. Somebody will come up and take this one. Okay, Jim will start them around. This one is a machine screw. It's so small that you can't see it unless you're holding it in your hand. And what this machine screw illustrates is an accident that happened on August 24th, 2004, just about almost exactly 2 years ago. On that date, a union brother named Mike Carney was killed by a little machine screw, exactly like the one we're passing around. It happened at Allegheny Ludlam Steel in Vandergrift, Pennsylvania. The screw was inside a radio control box for a crane. Over time, that screw had worked itself loose and fallen into the electrical contacts of that crane box and bridged two contacts. And as a result of that, the box no longer responded to the right controls, and the load began to fall. Mike Carney saw it begin to fall, jumped into its path to push another worker out of the way, and was himself killed by the falling steel. He was a hero, and he was felled by a tiny little machine screw, like the one we're passing around. Second item, this is a switch. That switch, actually that actual switch, killed a brother named Fred Mullins. Fred was working at the New Page Corporation, Local 988, in Chillicothe, Ohio, on May 7th of this year. He was feeding paper into a sheeter. To do that job, another employee works the control that moves the carriage that holds that paper roll back and forth. The switch controlled the carriage. That switch looks identical to many others in the plant. And the way all those other switches work is you twist it to the right, and the carriage or the part or whatever moves one way. You twist it to the left, and it moves the other way. That's the way all those switches work, except this one. This one switch was different. Twist it to the right, and the carriage moves out. To stop the carriage and to move it back, you twist the switch to the right again. The brother running the carriage didn't know that. First time he'd done that job. And so as that carriage was pinning Fred Mullins to the support behind it and ending his life, that worker was frantically trying to stop it by twisting the switch the way he knew every other switch in that plant worked. We had 2 casualties that day. Fred Mullins died. The other worker, who really wasn't to blame, will carry that accident forever. One little lousy $2 switch. Item number 3. It's a bolt. Ordinary half-inch machine bolt. Now that bolt didn't kill anybody. It was the lack of a bolt, or more precisely 4 of them, that did the job. On July 6th of this year, a little over a month ago, at a place called Young Windows in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, that's local 6816, a union brother named Tom Finneran was killed when a press brake, big piece of equipment that stamps metal, was brushed by a piece of mobile equipment. Press brake tipped over, fell on him. The base of that press brake had holes for bolts to secure it to the floor. They had never been installed. 4 lousy half-inch bolts. And a life ends. There's a great debate about unsafe conditions versus unsafe acts. It's kind of a sterile debate. And I think these 3 accidents illustrate that. Were there unsafe conditions? Sure. The dangerous radio box, the design of that switch and the moving paper carriage, the big top-heavy press brake that wasn't secured to the floor. Were there unsafe acts? Well, not by the victims, unless you count Mike Carney's jumping into the path of the falling steel, but he was trying to save a life. That was a heroic act, not one that we would normally call unsafe in the sense that we use that word. The engineer who designed the radio box probably committed an unsafe act, but that's a pretty easy design flaw to overlook. And yes, it was an unsafe act not to bolt that machine to the floor, but it wasn't the victim who was responsible for that unsafe act, so who's really to blame? Is anybody to blame? Is everybody to blame? Is it useful to even talk about blame? Or should we talk instead about prevention? Let me lay a little research on you. Since 1980, we've been collecting information on all the fatalities in the union, both to union members and also to anybody working in one of our plants, be it an outside contractor, a member of management, somebody making deliveries. And we looked, in August 2002, we took a kind of a comprehensive look at it. At that time, there were 848 fatalities in that database. The earlier reporting was better. In 1980, we achieved language in the steel contract that required companies to report fatalities to us. As time went along, we got better reporting from other industries as well. It's now a solemn obligation of staff reps to let us know in Pittsburgh immediately when somebody dies in one of our plants. And as part of what we call the emergency response team, when that happens in the United States, we send a team out to that local union right away, first to help investigate the accident, and second, to work with the family in a time of crisis. We call that, like I said, the emergency response team. So recent reporting is somewhat better. At any rate, we looked at these 848 fatalities. And here are some things we found which were kind of interesting. First, violations of legal standards, whether they're OSHA or MSHA or Canadian provincial standards or the few Canadian federal standards, those were not a major cause of most fatalities. Now, when somebody dies in the workplace, OSHA always goes in and inspects if it's an OSHA jurisdiction kind of plant. So does MSHA, so does every other jurisdiction. And they can usually find something to cite, but often it was at best a contributing factor and not the major root cause of the accident. Violations of work rules generally weren't a major cause either. That's surprising, but it's true. Those killed tend to have long company service and short service in the job they were doing at the time they were killed. Had been in the plant a long time, but they were doing something different than what they'd done for the bulk of their career. Technological change was a significant factor in a number of fatalities. And by technological change, we don't just mean new equipment, we mean new ways of doing the job as well. Technology has been defined sometimes as knowledge embedded in the work process, and it's embedded not only in new equipment and machinery, but also in new work systems, cellular manufacturing, things